Chapter 8, page 34. Of those who have attained a principality through crimes. But because one becomes prince from private individual, also by two modes which cannot be altogether attributed to either fortune or to virtue. I do not think they should be left out, although one of them can be reasoned about more amply where republics are treated. These are when one ascends to a principality by some criminal nefarious path, or when a private citizen becomes prince of his fatherland by the support of his fellow citizens. And to speak of the first mode, it will be shown with two examples, one ancient, the other modern, without entering otherwise into the merits of this issue, because I judge it sufficient for whoever would find it necessary to imitate them. Agathocles the Sicilian became king of Syracuse not only from private fortune, but from a mean and abject one. Born of a potter, he always kept to a life of crime at every rank of his career. Nonetheless, his crimes were accompanied with such virtue of spirit and body that when he turned to the military, he rose through its ranks to become praetor of Syracuse. After he was established in that rank, he decided to become prince and to hold with violence and without obligation to anyone else that which had been conceded to him by agreement, having given intelligence of his plan to Hamilcar the Carthaginian, who was with his armies fighting in Sicily. One morning he assembled the people and senate of Syracuse as if he had to decide things pertinent to the republic. At a signal he had ordered, he had all the senators and the richest of the people killed by his soldiers. Once they were dead, he seized and held the principate of that city without any civil controversy. And although he was defeated twice by the Carthaginians, Carthage defeated him twice, and in the end besieged. Not only was he able to defend his city, but also leaving part of his men for defense against the siege, he attacked Africa with the others. In a short time he freed Syracuse from the siege and brought Carthage, the people of Carthage, to dire necessity. They were compelled of necessity to come to an agreement with him, to be content with the possession of Africa and to leave Sicily to Agathocles. Thus, whoever might consider the actions and virtue of this man will see nothing or little that can be attributed to fortune, for, as was said above, not through anyone's support, but through the ranks of the military, which he had gained for himself with 1,000 hardships and dangers, he came to the principate, and afterwards he maintained it with many spirited and dangerous policies. Yet one cannot call it virtue to kill one's citizens, betray one's friends, to be without faith, without mercy, without religion. These modes can enable one to acquire empire, but not glory. For if one considers the virtue of Agathocles, in entering into and escaping from dangers and the greatness of his spirit in enduring and overcoming adversities, one does not see why he has to be judged inferior to any most excellent captain. Nonetheless, his savage cruelty and inhumanity, together with his infinite crimes, do not permit him to be celebrated among the most excellent men. Thus, one cannot attribute to fortune or to virtue what he achieved without either. In our times, during the reign of Alexander VI, Liberato da Fermo, having been left a fatherless child some years before, was brought up by a maternal uncle of his called Giovanni Fagliani. And in the first years of his youth, he was sent out to soldier under Paolo Vitelli, so that when he was versed in that discipline, he would attain an excellent rank in the military. Then when Paolo died, he fought under Vitellozzo, his brother, and in a very short time, since he was ingenious and dashing in spirit and person, he became the first man in his military. But as it appeared to him servile to be at the level of others, he thought that with the aid of certain citizens of Fermo, to which servitude was dearer than the liberty of their fatherland, and with support from the Vitelli, who he would seize Fermo. And he wrote to Giovanni Fagliani that since he had been away from home a few years, he wanted to come to see him in a city and in some part to acknowledge his patrimony, and because he had not troubled himself for anything but to acquire honor, he wanted to come in honorable fashion, accustomed by 100 horsemen of his friends and servants, so that his citizens might see that he had not spent the time in vain. He begged Giovanni to please order that he be received honorably by the inhabitants of Fermo, which would direct honor not only to him but to Giovanni himself, since Liberato was his ward. Thereupon Giovanni did not fail in any proper duty to his nephew, and when Liberato had been honorably received by the inhabitants of Fermo, he was lodged in Giovanni's house. There, after a few days had passed, and after he had waited to order secretly what was necessary for his future crime, he held a most solemn banquet, to which he invited Giovanni Fagliani and all the first men of Fermo. And when the food and all other entertainments customary at such banquets had been enjoyed, Liberato with cunning opened certain grave discussions, speaking of the greatness of Pope Alexander and of Caesar Borgia, his son, and of their undertakings. While Giovanni and the others were responding to these discussions, Liberato at a stroke stood up, saying that these were things that should be spoken of in a more secret place, and he withdrew to a room, into which Giovanni and all the other citizens came behind him. No sooner were they seated than soldiers came out of secret places and killed Giovanni and all the others. After this homicide, Liberato, mounted on a horse, rode through the town and besieged the highest magistracy in the palace, so that through fear they were compelled to obey him and to establish a government of which he was made prince. And since all those who could have hurt him because they were malcontent were dead, he strengthened himself with new civil and military orders, so that in the period of 1 year he held the principality. He was not only secure in the city of Fermo, but he'd become fearsome to all his neighbors. And to overthrow him would have been as difficult as to overthrow Agathocles, if he had not permitted himself to be besieged by Caesar Borgia, when at Sinigaglia, as was said above, he took the Orsini and the Vitelli. There Liberato too was taken 1 year after the parricide he committed, and together with Vitellozzo, who had been his master in his virtues and crimes, he was strangled. Someone could question how it happened that Agathocles and anyone like him, after infinite betrayals and cruelties, could live for a long time secure in his fatherland, defend himself against external enemies, and never be conspired against by his citizens, inasmuch as many others have not been able to maintain their states through cruelty, even in peaceful times, not to mention uncertain times of war. I believe that this comes from cruelties badly used or well used. Those can be called well used, if it is permissible to speak well of evil, that are done at a stroke out of the necessity to secure oneself, and then are not persisted in, but are turned to as much utility for the subjects as one can. Those cruelties are badly used, which, though few in the beginning, rather grow with time than are eliminated. Those who observe the first mode can have some remedy for their state with God and with men, as had Agathocles. As for the others, it is impossible for them to maintain themselves. Hence, it should be noted that in the taking hold of a state, he who seizes it should review all the offenses necessary for him to commit, and then do them all at a stroke, so as not to have to renew them every day, and by not renewing them, to secure men and gain them to himself with benefits. Whoever does otherwise, either through timidity or through bad counsel, is always under necessity to hold a knife in his hand, nor can one ever found himself on the subjects if, because of fresh and continued injuries, they cannot be secured against him. For injuries must be done altogether, so that being tasted less, they offend less. And benefits should be done little by little, so that they may be tasted better. And above all, prince should live with his subjects, so that no single accident, whether bad or good, has to make him change. For when necessities come in adverse times, you will not be in time for evil, and the good that you do does not help you, because it is judged to be forced on you, and cannot bring you any gratitude. So that's 38. 9 of the civil principality, give you a little teaser. But coming to the other policy, when a private citizen becomes prince of his fatherland, not through crime or other intolerable violence, but with the support of his fellow citizens, which one would call a civil principality. Neither all virtue nor all fortune is necessary to attain it, but rather a fortunate astuteness. I say that one ascends. So that'll be the next one. So there we go. Chapter 8 is finished. It's only 111 pages. I think only, 9 more